Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of McFly's Movie House. I'm your host, Marta McFly, and for today's chat, I'm talking to the director behind Pakistan's official entry for the Best International Feature Film at the 2024 Academy Awards. The movie in question is called In Flames. It is a co-production between Pakistan and Canada, and it is a psychological and supernatural horror slash social drama that's deeply unsettling and as it should be. So, let me quickly describe the plot before I introduce our guest today. In Flames is set in contemporary Karachi and it revolves around our lead, Miriam, played by Ramisha Nawal, a young woman and med school student who lives with her mother, Fariha, played by Bakhtar Mazar, and her brother in a small apartment. Once Miriam's grandfather dies, her uncle tries to manipulate her mother into signing over their apartment to him. And this sort of power struggle is a common occurrence in Pakistan where women's property rights are not enforced. And as such, In Flames showcases how, in some cultures, the patriarchy has complete control over women. So this movie blew me away. It actually had its world premiere at the 76th Cannes Film Festival in the Director's Fortnight section, the first Pakistani film to do so in over 47 years. And actually, recently it won the Best First Feature Film Award at the Canadian Screen Awards. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome the award-winning filmmaker, Zarrar Kahn, to the podcast. Hello. Congratulations on your success so far. How are you?
Thanks, Marta, and thank you so much for having me on your show. It's good to be here and to chat about movies.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that you took time out of your day for this. And there's so much that I want to chat to you about in regards to the film. But before we get started, because this podcast is a home for unearthing cinema's hidden gems, I always ask my guests to highlight what they've watched recently and what they can recommend to me, selfishly, and our listeners.
Currently, I'm visiting my sister who just had a baby, so I haven't, and I'm helping out with childcare. I actually haven't seen anything in like 2 weeks since I got
Fair.
here. The last thing I think a movie that I think of as like a hidden gem is this film called Bedeviled. And I saw it at TIFF. They do these kind of like screenings once a week for people who are TIFF members. And
Mhm.
it's this indigenous genre movie that was shot in like the 90s in Australia, shot by like an indigenous female director. And it's like incredible. It's like, it's largely on a soundstage, but it's also documentary style. And I remember watching this movie and just thinking about like, wow, how did this movie get made? This movie is incredible. It's doing so many things with craft and storytelling and combining different mediums of storytelling to create this film. So I think that was a film that I know not a lot of people have seen. I don't even think a lot of people in Australia have seen because I spoke to this Australian producer recently and she's like, how did you hear of that? And I'm like, thank God for TIFF, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, Bedeviled, an
Cool.
Australian indigenous genre movie.
Okay, I'm gonna check that out myself because yeah, you're right. I haven't even heard about that, but that definitely seems like something that'd be up my alley, and same
It's a
for my
deep cut,
listeners.
not gonna lie.
Yeah, I love that. That's what we're all about. So I love that. I know you've mentioned in interviews before, but I want my listeners to know as well. How did the idea for In Flames come to be? Because from what I understand, your short film from 2018, Dia, explored similar themes. No?
So, I mean, I first made the short film, the 2018, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember after that was done, like wanting to return to that world and those characters. The short version was dealing with like a mother and a daughter and how they're dealing with grief again and kind of the aftermath of the death that happens that affects all of them. But I remember it was a 24-minute short, so it was a long short, and I remember that was my first film to kind of like really break me out and get me to like a real festival that wasn't like a ma and pa shop. Like it played at Locarno in Switzerland, which is this incredible festival dedicated to art house cinema. And I remember like the world premiere of that and then coming out of the theater, and it was a really diverse audience and a lot of people really resonating with the themes. And then also feeling like I really wanted to return to this world of this family in Karachi, in urban Karachi, that's dealing with the patriarchy, that's dealing with property, that's dealing with making ends meet, that's dealing with all of these pressures that come from living in this city that's kind of like really a microcosm of Pakistani society. And that, realizing that I think would be the film that I wanted to make as my feature. And then in that period from 2018 to 2023, which is when we shot the film, kind of really falling in love with like global genre art house movies. And that's a wide net, but like movies and kind of like world cinema, because like, during the pandemic, I guess we were all watching movies, and I was really watching like a lot of movies from Italy and from Africa and parts of the world that I hadn't been to, and like diving into that cinema. And I remember seeing a film called Tuki Buki, which ended up being like a big visual reference for me, as well as Hyenas, which are both films that are shot in Dakar in Senegal. And wanting to bring all of those components into telling this film that's very Pakistani, but using genre as an entry point for international audiences to be able to really fall into the psychology of what it's like for this family.
I love that. And what would you say your goal was with this film? Like the overall theme that you want people to take away?
I want people to take away like the importance of community in the face of oppression and how
Hmm.
communities can band together. And lately, there's this thing I've been hearing a lot, really in regards to the Palestine protests, which is students saying that, who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. And that's also a response to how systems of oppression, the structures are not built to protect the vulnerable. They're built to protect those who are in charge, who are in power. So, this film, what I want people to take away is that it's community that will protect you, that will allow you to survive through circumstances that can feel overwhelming.
I love that. That's beautiful. And from what I understand, Bakhtar helped with the script, right? Can you explain what that process was working with her to transform it into something that was authentic to the experience living as a woman in Pakistan?
Well, I'm not a woman, so that, right away, I wanted to ensure that when we're telling this story, our female collaborators were kind of like front and center.
Hmm.
And while I've been living in Pakistan, well, I recently moved to Toronto about a year and a half ago, but I'm Pakistani. I was born in Karachi. My career was nurtured for the last 10 years in that city, and that's really where I grew as an artist. And I met Bukhtaur 2018 when we were casting for Dia. And that was the first film that she did because she took a big hiatus from working after she had children. So she always wanted to be an actress, but she didn't have like kind of the supports in place in her life to go down that route, and being an
Hmm.
artist in any place in the world is deeply challenging. Pakistan more so in many ways, especially if you're a woman. And then she did that film with me, and that film was really successful for us. None of us were expecting for it to break out as it did, and it was her first film, and we just kind of really developed this relationship where once I told her I wanted to make it into a film, I started sending her like drafts of the screenplay, and then we would have these like really kind of vulnerable heart to heart zooms, because this was all over the pandemic, where one side it was like, we don't know if this movie's ever going to get made, so let's just be very honest and very vulnerable with our experiences. And Bakhtawa really opened up to me about navigating Pakistani society as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, as an actress, and that ended up deeply informing her character
Hmm.
in a way that I'm so grateful. And that's become a big kind of touchstone for me in the way that I work, because even before In Flames, a lot of the stories that I've always been attracted to are people who kind of find themselves on the margins of society. So the way that I developed my career was doing through short films, and I did a short films on a lot of different communities in Karachi that like no one's ever heard of or spoken of. And the way that I was developing those was always kind of like really working intentionally with those communities. Because I've always found that everyone, with whatever power and whatever agency they have, is amplifying their own voice. So as a director, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, I have a medium that I can use to help amplify of the work that's already being done. And that was always kind of the intention within Flames, and really any of my cinema. Like right now, I'm doing a film that I'm exploring about Gen Z, and I'm like,
Oh,
well,
wow.
the ship has sailed. So I'm working with Gen Z talent who are reading early drafts of the script, and
Wow.
the psychology is quite different for them in the way that they internalize the world around them than it was for me as a millennial.
Hmm. Yeah, same. I'm a millennial too, so I know exactly what you mean. How was working with Ramisha and Bakhtar specifically, navigating such a sensitive topic? Were there any protocols in place to help them mentally, I guess, deal with such a harrowing subject matter?
I like, we were an independent film, so really working on a really tight budget.
Mm-hmm.
And our intention was to create a space on set where they felt safe.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to do that was to have a lot of female heads of department. So we had our line producer, Carol Nerona, who was kind of like the big boss on set. Then we had my producer, Anim Abbas. And then we had our DP, Egil Nurbulatova, who came in from Kazakhstan. This was her first time being in South Asia. And, the DP, I think, is like the most intimate relationship that the actor actually ends up happening, because so many of the scenes of this film are only possible because we had a female DP on set. And we were doing a closed set for a lot of those scenes where Misha and Bakhtar were being pushed into places that were vulnerable. And that is very new for Pakistan. It's new all over the world. I don't know why I say that. But, usually if you're in a film set, there's like 80 dudes who are on the set, and it looks very intimate, but there's like 4 women, So this time what we were doing was, when we were shooting scenes where we were asking characters to be vulnerable, we like kicked everyone out into like the hallway of the apartment. And that's also where I was with my monitor. And the only person who was with Ramisha was Egil. So Ramisha felt, safe to be vulnerable. And I'm grateful that we were able to kind of build that camaraderie. That being said, I don't abide by like kind of the old school directors and somewhat current, where they're like, oh, we tortured our actresses to get this performance. And, I love Hitchcock, but when I hear about what he's done to his female actresses, that's fucked.
Yep.
You hire actors so they can act, like that's the purpose of their job. And when it felt like we were going too far, I would just pull back. And I remember one scene where, it was a really pivotal moment, and like we needed Mariam to break down, and Ramisha was telling me she couldn't do it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. We will come up with an alternative for how to capture that moment, where if you can't go there and it's not happening and we're finding light, we will figure out an alternative, because, all we have to do is move the camera, and it's a visual medium. It doesn't have to be on your face. And it ended up being one of the primary stills that we used of the film, which is the shot where she gets up after a pivotal moment, and they're on this road, and there's like this mountain in the background, and it's just her silhouette. And that ended up conveying the heaviness of what happened the scene prior. So I don't know. I think there's always ways to create a set where your performers feel trusted to be vulnerable. And I think for too long, we've relied on just being terrible people. I don't know.
You're not wrong. So I know what you mean. It's true. And I love that as well, because I never would have gotten that impression watching the film that anything would have been difficult for her to convey, because she conveys so much and so well. It just
she's an incredible actress.
Yeah.
She's like this. The fact that this is her first movie, the fact that this is her first time on camera, I like don't even know what would be the levels that she will go to. And like where she'll be 20 years from now. Like, I don't know, like this is the kind of performance you get on like a 4th or 5th feature, not right off the bat. So, but that being said, like there are days and moments where it's like you're so drained, and you've had an 18-hour day, and we're at the beach, and and that's where it's like, okay, like you don't have to go there. And knowing in my head that we still have 12 days left of this film, And I remember when we did our wrap party, it was like hilarious, because like we didn't have any money for a wrap party. So we had gotten a hotel in Pakistan called Beach Luxury, which is like a 4-star incredible hotel, by the way.
Wow.
And they put up our whole cast and crew for free for 25 nights, which was like insane. It's owned by these lovely people called the Avaris, and they've been long supporters of the arts and supporters of my career in particular. And we did something kind of shitty where we were like, oh, like, we're just like, can we have a big meeting room, like a boardroom? Because like, we just want to have a quick impromptu meeting. Yeah. And they're like, I'm like, we're like, we'll pay for it. This is just like literally after we wrap our last day. And we're just like, everyone's like, what are we doing now? And I'm like, what are we doing now? And then we like convinced the manager to give us like this, like boardroom that they have in the hotel. And then we start like bringing in a speaker and like bringing in like crates of like drinking beverages. Wow. And they're like, what's going on here? And then it was like crazy. We finished like after like a 14-hour day, and then like
Mhm.
everyone's partying like mad in this boardroom.
Love it.
So I think, I don't know, it was, I got my first migraine on this set. It was long days, but I would love to do it all again.
Hmm.
The
Of
days
course.
would be shorter this time around, though. Yeah.
Pray for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, speaking of Pakistan, how was the film received when you showed it there?
Divisively.
Okay.
So that Pakistan was our first theatrical. To qualify for the Oscars, you have to do a theatrical in the country that's nominated you. So
Oh,
like we
interesting.
weren't really prepared because we got the Oscar nomination and we'd been looking for a distributor in Pakistan and we weren't able to find one because, the film is quite controversial in many ways,
Hmm.
and the kind of the bread and butter of the Pakistan film industry is these like broad family comedies. So me and my producer decided to self-distribute, and we started off in one cinema in Karachi, which is where the film was shot, and in so many ways, like that's where the crew is from, and that's where my base
Hmm.
is. And then we were able to expand to like 4 cinemas in Karachi and 6 cinemas in Lahore. So we were able to do that based on the response. But that being said, like it was a divisive film, It was embraced by the younger generation, who I think is really ready for change and has a different mindset. But I remember Bakhtawa telling me she went to watch the movie on the premiere day with her brother, and he walked out of the cinema
Wow.
because he was like not happy with a lot of the things being shown on screen.
Hmm.
And when I look back now, because I have that distance from it, a lot of the best reviews and the think pieces I come back to the film are written by Pakistani women who live in Pakistan.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
it's engagement that's so specific and so like speaking to the world of the film and what we were hoping to create and execute. And then simultaneously, one of like our worst reviews is from a senior male Pakistani critic who it was really pissed, and he's like, we don't need this movie because this is not a problem in Pakistan, so why does this film exist? And I'm reading
What?
this review and I'm like, is this a joke? Like, okay, like your why.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be one of those filmmakers who shits on critics either.
Hmm.
So, because I think film criticism is also a really underserved community, and I also know that it's a really tough job.
Hmm. I would know.
Yeah, yes,
Yes.
and like the economy of film criticism is something I don't even understand.
It's on both ends. It's a struggle. So I understand completely. I watched In Flames, as I was telling you before we started recording, in Vancouver in April, and you were there along with some of the cast for the Q&A afterwards. And I just need to let you know that was, like I said, the most emotional Q&A I've ever been a part of. Audience members, me included, were shedding tears as they were asking you questions. And I'm wondering, is this common, this sort of visceral reaction to other Q&As that you've had around the world?
Yeah, yes.
Wow.
There was a point where I remember thinking that it would be great if we had someone who was like a therapist or could offer resources at the end of the
Yes.
film, because the film does bring up a lot of very real issues, and it tries to communicate it in a way not of titillation but of placing
Hmm.
you in the reality of these characters, and that can be triggering.
Hmm.
And so like maybe in the next round we'll have resources available at the end of the film.
Hmm.
That was a tough Q&A, man. Like I started tearing up as well. And
I remember.
it was that audience member, for your viewers, she walked in off the street and didn't
Hmm.
know what the film was about and was watching it with her friend because her friend worked at the movie theater,
Hmm.
and she had been a victim of domestic violence and sexual abuse, and the film brought up a lot of those feelings. And she was then brave enough to share her experiences with everyone in the cinema and speak to how this film helped her.
Hmm.
And that has been something that we have experienced in a few cinemas. It happened just in London. We were
Hmm.
at the Curzon for our like London premiere, and something similar happened. And I was not great because I'm not great with emotional stuff. I put it
Hmm.
all in the movie. I like being behind the camera, and when you're faced with someone telling you about the most horrifying thing that's happened to you, and yeah, I don't know how people can be that brave. You know, it boggles my mind how people can be that brave, because it's such a scary and vulnerable thing to say. But we need that kind of bravery. We need more of it. We had someone at the LA screening start shouting at me, which was
Oh,
also interesting. I don't even know how he ended up at this movie, because he was like so angry that the film existed and telling me that, has my mother seen it? Has my sister seen it? Has my wife seen it? And yeah, he was really aggressive. And then something beautiful happened from that, where the other people in the cinema like came to the defense of the movie, saying that, we need
wow.
this movie and we shouldn't be sweeping these things under the rug. We should be talking about these things.
Hmm.
So it's a movie that, if you're invested in it, it can speak to those things very viscerally. And I hope that all the cinema I create in the future hopefully can continue to do that.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that so much. And I think, especially, I mean, the experience in Vancouver, this experience you mentioned in LA, it just speaks again to this concept of community, right? Like even on this level, a community coming together, a community of film lovers to want to share this powerful message. So yeah, I mean, your film has just brought so much good, in my opinion, and thank you. But back to the Q&A really quickly. I just went off track there for a second. At the same Q&A, the Vancouver one, someone mentioned how they loved the scene with Miriam putting on her abaya. And I wanted to mention that to you because that was one of my favorite scenes
It's
as
one of my
well.
favorite scenes.
Oh, nice. We have
Yeah.
that in common. And the reason why I loved it so much, I mean, first of all, it's stunning, it's beautiful, but also because it seemed to veer into this dreamlike territory. It felt surreal. And to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I almost felt like it was our lead coming out of her shell and forming this new version of herself for what's to come. And again, I don't know if I'm interpreting that correctly, but it just seems to me like nothing is accidental in your film, and you have this meticulously thought out lyricism that you're presenting. So, can you explain a bit more about that
I
scene?
mean, I love that interpretation because,
Oh.
it is a scene where our character has a choice with what she wants to believe. And, it's a scene that's so devastating for her because, in one way, at the end of this scene, she can realize that everything that she feared is true. And then in the other way, she can, everything that the deepest part of her hopes did not happen. She's still hoping. She doesn't have hope here, but she's hoping that she was wrong, So we're seeing Mariam grapple with that in this scene where she's putting on her armor, and it is
Hmm.
wearing it like armor. And then the way that we visually were able to capture that with this kind of mirrored lens that we put in front of the camera, where you see this choice happening with these two different Mariams coming
Yes.
out from the reflection that we're creating by this mirrored lens. And then simultaneously, the song that's playing there and the sound design is
Hmm.
some of my favorite beats in the movie, because it's a song that's a Punjabi song that's sung by the granddaughter of Noor Jahan, who is like the Adele for like South
Oh,
Asia. She's
wow.
like one of, so this is her granddaughter who sang that song. And we layered it with the score by our incredible composer, Kalesan Kalachevan. And our sound designer, Brett, was able to mix this where it starts off from like the song that's just playing from the rickshaw driver, and
Hmm.
then morphs into this really haunting lamentation about a woman crying out for her lover, and then
Wow.
morphs into this really kind of haunting echo soundscape that carries us as she walks out of her bedroom,
Yeah.
So there's so much happening in that scene, which is just like a
I
mid
love
shot
it.
of her
Yeah.
putting on her abaya. But it really conveyed that emotional complexity that
Hmm.
we wanted to create. And, it's only possible because of all of these incredible different artists who came together to make this movie.
Hmm.
Like, I hope that in the future we move more away from like the directors and auteur, and more about like the community of artists who come together, because, without all of these incredible people, that scene wouldn't exist.
Yeah. Wow. And is that the main thing that drives you as a filmmaker, that sense of community and coming together, or what is it?
I think what drives me as a storyteller is I definitely love being on set with
Hmm.
everyone and everyone coming together. I've always been attracted to telling stories, and I feel like the stories I'm interested in telling like I haven't seen before, or like I haven't seen that perspective or that lens before.
Hmm.
So as much as we say that like there's a plethora of cinema, like a lot of it's the same, you
Yeah.
know? So I think there's a lot of excitement, but also resistance from the old guard who are like,
Hmm.
oh, our movies aren't being made for 900 million anymore. And then there's like the new guard who are like, but we're going to create movies for like no money,
Hmm.
and we're going to tell it in one way or another. And then because of where we are in society, those films are now accessible, because of like streamers and the internet. So I don't know. I think what drives me is the fact that it's like, it's the best art form because
Yeah.
it combines everything. It combines
Hmm.
performance, it combines dance, costuming, music, set design. It's like all of these different things that I was always passionate about put into one medium. And that's incredible that like we have this as a medium.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. Can you tell me what some of the films were that helped you decide, wow, I want to be a filmmaker?
I think one film that really was like a big touchstone for me, and this is something I discovered later, was like The Big City by Satyajit Ray. And it's
Okay.
this incredible film. So Satyajit Ray is like the most prolific South Asian filmmaker, and this is one of his films that I feel
Oh,
like is kind of
yeah.
slept on. It's a film about urban life and about a wife who in like 1955 Delhi becomes the bread earner for her family.
Uh-huh.
And she's doing that by selling makeup going door to door. And it's like this conversation about gender roles that's so progressive, but at the end of the day it's about like capitalism and how capitalism alienates people, and how it's all in so many ways anti-community because it's pro individualism. So it was just like this incredible movie that was so ahead of its time that I was like, man, like I want to be a part of that world of creating cinema that can speak to people on all of these different layers. And that, yeah, so that was a film thematically that really resonated.
Hmm.
And there's this film that I really loved called The Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion. It's like an Italian movie that a friend of mine
Okay.
recommended. And it's like it's a brutal satire of fascism. And it's
Okay.
like funny and it's absurd. And I remember watching that again, kind of like a switch kind of flipping about how you can use cinema to comment on a society
Yes.
through this medium.
Yep.
And, that's really what both of these filmmakers were doing. But utilizing different ways where,
Hmm.
The Big City is like a drama through and through. And then Investigation of a Citizen is like almost like a noir movie,
Interesting.
but with absurdist elements. And then also, really liking like horror and contemporary horror, I think is more where my influences come from, the classical horror. Like loving this movie I saw, I can't remember the name, but it was by a British African filmmaker. And it's about these two migrants and who are, what was
I
it
know the
called?
one.
Do
Oh,
you know
this
what I'm
is
talking
gonna
about? His
bother me. They
House.
yes, 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 yes. And it's kind of like a ghost story and they live
Yeah.
they that rented house or not
Yes.
rented, but yes,
You
that one.
know?
Yep.
And just like recognizing the Trojan horse that genre cinema can be. And
Hmm.
that movie did it in such a ingenious way. So yeah, I mean, these were all films that inspired me, but I cannot say that these are movies I grew up with. Like
Yeah.
I don't come from a film family. I grew up with like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and like Die Hard 2. Those are the
Yeah.
movies I grew up with. I'd love to say, but these are films I discovered that really set me on what kind of filmmaker I want to be.
Hmm. I love that. That's beautiful. I was so excited to hear you say Ray. I actually didn't recognize who you were talking about initially because your pronunciation is so good and mine isn't. But I just finished his Apu trilogy not too long ago and I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to dive more into his work. So that's going to be next for me,
That's the
definitely.
one trilogy I haven't seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It's incredible.
I need to watch it. I have seen everything of his that's urban and
Uh-huh.
nothing of his that's like nature based.
Oh,
So
wow.
like Hero, like the chess
Yeah.
players, like Music Car, like I did a deep dive and I was intentionally like, oh, is this a rural setting? Pass.
Pass.
Um,
Yeah.
because I've like grew up in Karachi. I'm now living
Hmm.
in Toronto. I'm deeply a city person, but I'm now starting to see why people like nature.
Yeah. No, the Apu trilogy is absolutely marvelous. I mean, initially I thought it was going to be too slow for me too, and
Yeah.
you truly watch this boy grow up from the moment he's born to an adult,
So
and
it's like the original Boyhood.
literally, literally. So I would
Cool.
definitely check it out. It's
I will
incredible. I'm a
watch
huge
it.
fan. Yay.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, of course. Thank you for the other suggestions. But let's dive back. So I want to hear about just, I guess, how you felt, the impressive accomplishments of taking the film to Cannes, how it felt to have it there, how it felt to, have it be an official entry at the Academy Awards. I mean, these are huge things. I just want to know these sensations that you were feeling.
Like overwhelming, like all the time. It's been a crazy ride. To preface, like, we are a first feature that is a micro budget feature from like the least amount of money the Canadian government will give you to make a movie that was shot in Pakistan that didn't have a ton of expectations around it. And then we actually went through quite a few rejections before we got to Cannes. Before we got that acceptance, we had sent out a rough cut of the film.
Mhm.
And, I now, if I were to do it again, I would hang on to my gut because with Cannes, I like told people that I had submitted like a lot of our, and I had it. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'll submit. But I was waiting until now that like the movie was completely done, like 100%, like all the credits are done. And I think because this film also really relies on like VFX, for films that are more narrative driven and aren't a first feature, I think you'll get more leeway. But when you're a first time filmmaker, there's not a ton of leeway. You know what I mean? And they're like looking for the best version of the movie. And
Mhm.
our best version was the complete one. So we had rejections from a couple places. I won't say. We even had some acceptances from some other places, and we said no to all of those because I'm like,
Wow.
I believe in this movie. And I remember like having a panic attack. Man, this movie's been an emotional ride when we said no to this festival because it was a good festival, but I'm like, I know we can do better.
Wow.
So we had nothing else at that point after we said no to that festival. And for a film like ours, festivals are where you expand. And
Mhm.
then once the final film was done, I submitted it, and then we were one of the first films selected at Cannes Directors Fortnight.
Wow.
And there was a new artistic director, and he like emailed me being like, we have to talk. And I'm like, okay, that's a good sign. Like if it's a
Yeah.
no, they wouldn't email. And I just remember getting on a call with him and him being like very French and just being like, your film is like it's a good movie, and would you be interested in screening it at Fortnight? And do you want to come to
Wow.
Cannes? And like me and my producer being like, yes, 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 and him being like, no, 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 like go and think about it and come back to me after some time and no rush, like please consider it. And we're just
What?
like, is he not understanding? you know? So we switched the Zoom call off, and then I like went and bought a bottle of champagne, and I like waited for
Yes.
it to be like 59 minutes, and then it was 1 hour, and I emailed him being like, yes, please. And yeah, then we got into Cannes, and they gave us an
Uh-huh.
incredible slot. It was the Friday night slot for the opening weekend,
Wow.
because even with Cannes, there's like very much like most people are gone after the opening weekend.
Hmm.
So you want to be that opening weekend. And they gave us an incredible slot. And you also don't want to be like, we were 4 p.m., which is clutch because at 8 p.m., everyone's like kind of drunk and at a
Yeah.
party. So you just don't want to be like the nighttime slot. You want to be that sweet spot when they're awake and they've
Hmm.
had lunch. So yeah, we got an incredible slot. We got support from Telefilm Canada to bring in our cast and crew from Pakistan, from Canada, from Kazakhstan.
Wow.
So all these incredible artists met in Cannes, some of which it was their first time flying out of Pakistan and like getting visas. When you have a visa from a country like Pakistan, that's a tough passport to travel with.
Hmm.
So we had to like speak to the French embassy and like get letters and get all this stuff sorted, make sure people had passports. And then we had a delegation of around 22 people. And it was amazing because they were all meeting for the first time in the south of France at Cannes for our movie premiere. So it was so surreal. And I remember like our premiere day, and like so at Cannes they do this thing where after the movie's done they'll like shove a camera in front of you and you're supposed to stand there while people clap. And I like the second the lights came on, people were clapping. I like my heart was pounding and I had to leave the cinema because I'm like, I can't deal with
Wow.
this. So
Yeah.
I bolted out of there and everyone's like, where is he going? Um, so and I was in the stairwell and then everyone else came out like 20 minutes later after all the applause and all that stuff. And it was really beautiful. And then
Wow.
we all went to the beach and like had some champagne and like we're just like dipping our feet in the ocean and it was incredible, you know, and
Wow.
then it's just been really, really wild. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, that's beautiful. I also love the through line of champagne, just
Oh
celebrating each
yeah. Yeah.
success.
Well, when in
You
France,
got
you
it.
know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I gotta say as well, the film, as I mentioned it earlier, is just sublime visually. The colors pop in some moments, and maybe again, this is just me being, I don't even know what, but I got the vibe that visually it reminded me of a giallo, like stuff from Bava or Argento, where you have these rich, luscious colors. Were giallos an inspiration for the visual palette?
Argento was, and I
Okay.
fuck with Suspiria.
Same.
It's like beautiful and it's got the
Yes.
exact same color palette as Karachi where it's like
Mm.
pink, neon green, and it's like orange. But
Yep.
the difference is in Karachi, it's so hot and sunny that all those colors feel kind of like washed out and pastelly. So I remember when I watched Suspiria and I was like, okay, these are the same colors that we
Yes.
have, but we just need to make them into the way that they're experienced in Karachi, you know? So it was totally a visual reference because I mean, it's such a they're such beautiful movies. You know what I mean? Like every
Hmm.
frame is a painting. And my DP, a Golden Bolatova, you know, the way that we built out the visual palette of the world was watching all of these really diverse references. So like watching hyenas and then
Hmm.
watching a Bertolucci film and then watching Suspiria together and her being like, what are you doing? You know? And me being like, these are all the references for the way that we're
Wow.
moving the camera, the kind of language that we want, also the color palette. And then this was the kind of collaboration that happens really rarely, I found,
Hmm.
where you and your DP can kind of just like click. And even though, you know, we speak different languages, English was kind of our commonplace. And we were able to really build out that relationship where we had a very clear visual language with the film and like a great shorthand on set
Hmm.
and going into it, you know, knowing that colors are going to be deeply important, our the way that we move our camera is going to be deeply important. We shot a huge chunk of this film in blue hour, which is right after the sun sets, and it's like this kind of eerie but also beautiful and also soft. And it's really hard to capture that in Karachi because often it's really hot and the sun is right up here. And I'm like, that's not the Karachi we're evoking here. You know, we're evoking this Karachi that feels haunted, that
Yes.
is often, you know, lit through the neon lights of the city and how those neon lights spill into the domestic space. So it was watching a lot of movies together and, you know, these great filmmakers, because so much has been done in the past, and just bringing it into the visual world of Karachi and making sure that was kind of, at the end of the day, we didn't want a beautiful shot that was just a beautiful shot. It needed to be a shot that was tied to the psychology of the character, but also really inspired by the city that we live in.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I also want to touch on the score as well and the sound design because, to me at least, that really added to the tense sensations experienced when watching the film. It's incredible. So I kind of want to ask you about the sonic perspective of the film and if you find sound to be equally as important to the visuals that you're presenting to viewers as well.
I think sounds are like so underrated because it's like in so many ways like a way more affordable way to like create the world of the character. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Because ultimately it's like it can do so much, and so much of this film is sound that's diegetic, that's like
Yep.
experienced through these characters. So when there's these really big moments like a car being smashed or like someone, you know, drowning, you're not hearing like the sounds of the city, you're just hearing how that character experiences it. And I think that can make cinema so much more intimate. And so that was really like a leading point with my sound designer, Brett Killerin, where we want all the sounds to be how they're felt. And with Kalason, talking about how we want it to be terrifying, but not terrifying in a way that we've already experienced it. You know what I mean? Because horror has been around for so long.
Hmm.
So how do we do it for instrumentation that's also indigenous to the region? One of the things that we were able to do was in Karachi late at night, there's like a security guard who like walks by neighborhoods, and his
Hmm.
job is to like he'll clang a metal stick on the ground and he'll blow a whistle, and
Okay.
that's letting people know that like it is safe. And if you don't hear
Ah,
that sound, you should be worried because then it's no longer safe. And
wow.
I remember as a kid in Karachi growing up, finding that sound terrifying because I'm like, what is this banshee? What is this creature that's making the sound at like 4 a.m., And then as an adult, really questioning why we needed to be reminded of safety. And then thinking about communities for who there is no safety. And then using that sound as the trigger sound for many of the scenes where something horrifying is happening to our protagonists and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And even though we know
Hmm.
it's coming, we're terrified for them because there's no safety.
Hmm.
So those were kind of a lot of the elements that came together to build out the sonic palette. And that being said, we also have some great needle drops, I think. Um,
Yes.
and those are also incredible Pakistani musicians because right now, in some ways, we have this renaissance of Pakistani independent film and also Pakistani pop music and Pakistani
Hmm.
music. And I'll go back to the fact that a lot of this is coming from the fact that it's more affordable and the means of production have changed. So now we have these bedroom artists who are blowing up, and they were kind enough to let us use their music in the movie. And there's a scene in the film that is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which is when they're escaping the city and they're
Hmm.
on a motorcycle and like the wind is blowing and you have this wide of like the mountains of Balochistan that you can see as they make their way to the Arabian Sea. And we have this pop track called Choro by Natasha Noorani that's playing, and it's such a beautiful song, and the way that all of that came together really felt like these young people who are falling in love and experiencing that for the first time in a very dark movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. You also mentioned briefly now the renaissance of Pakistani cinema going on. Can you tell us some other films we should be checking out?
Another one that will be coming soon is called The Glassworker. It's by Osman Rayaz, and it's like Pakistan's first hand-drawn animation inspired by
Oh,
Studio Ghibli.
wow.
And it's
Oh, wow.
premiering, yeah, and it's premiering at Annecy in competition, which is like the world's
Okay.
biggest animation film festival. It's the
Uh-huh.
first time that's ever happened.
Wow.
There's also another film called Queen of My Dreams that's playing in Toronto that was also at TIFF. It's a really beautiful comedy. And there's a film that's in development that also starring Ramisha that I can't say too much
Mm,
about that's
okay.
shooting this summer.
Okay.
So we're seeing this thing where, Pakistani, I'm hoping it's come in bursts before, but never this prolifically,
Mhm.
never with this kind of much global attention. A lot of it is driven by artists who are younger, um, who, because there was the old guard who really tried, and then the world wasn't so interconnected then. So even though they were making incredible, beautiful films, people weren't hearing about them. And now, thanks to the internet, people are hearing about our movies and wanting to watch them and wanting to see these stories that they haven't seen before. So I think it's a really exciting time for Pakistani cinema. And then, we're doing what we can to keep that movement going because the country doesn't have any federal funds. We have a lot of censor boards, but there's not a single like film organization. But there's money to ensure that films aren't seen. So like me and one of my producers, Minna Hussein, have like we've set up a short film fund, and the first film from that will be coming out quite soon, and we're in the process of greenlighting another one. So it is kind of like this global recognition for Pakistani cinema and these kind of international co-productions between Canada, between France, between Germany, between the US. I think it allows those countries' film industries to be more global because I think Canadian cinema for a long time it was like in the shadow of American cinema. And right now, Canadian cinema is also transforming. And I'm so excited that In Flames can be a part of both of those transformations, both in Canada and in Pakistan. But it's when those, and like it's interesting because French cinema has been doing it forever, where they'll bring a French producer and work with like Haiti, and then like now this is a French Haitian movie, and
Yeah.
then France gets to be the final like authority on what cinema is because they're making global cinema. And I'm
Hmm.
like, Canada should take the same approach, and now we're starting to,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, where and it also builds scaffolding and makes, especially I think now that we're in the time where something like Squid Game can be the number one show in the world, people don't care about subtitles anymore, they just care about
Yeah.
a good story.
Which, thank
So
God. Yeah.
yeah, I think thank God, and I'm excited for where we are. And a lot of people say that cinema is going through tough times, and I'm like, no, cinema is expanding and changing in an exciting new way. So I'm excited. I'm optimistic.
I couldn't agree more. Exactly. Especially with the whole subtitle thing as well. I mean, when I still hear people saying that they won't watch a movie due to subtitles, I'm like, you're so removed from so much beauty and just so much out there that you could be exploring, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and also I'm like, just put on the dub track now. Like you can just switch it to English if you want. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, we're living in interesting times.
For sure. Well, I love asking my guests this next question because I find their responses so fascinating. If there's one thing that you could change about the filmmaking industry, what would it be?
It's just more diversity,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and below the line. For your viewers out there who don't know what that means, above the line is your director, producer, writer. And there has been movements and active movements to make that space more diverse, but that doesn't make up like 80% of the people who are on set. So your gaffer, your sound operator, there's so many positions that need streamlines for diversification. And those positions are often deeply lucrative as well. So they're definitely being gatekept. So we need gender diversity, we need racial diversity, we need indigenous diversity, we need to, the industry has a huge way to go.
I agree. Absolutely. And last question for you today. What is next for you on the horizon in terms of projects, or is there anything that you can share at all?
A little bit. I'm
Okay.
developing a climate change coming of age queer thriller that is again like a genre blender, which is I think going to be where I live as an artist. And yeah, that's the project that I'm working on right now. And
Okay.
I'm also working on something that's set in Northern Ireland, but that's pretty early days. So those are kind of the two projects that I'm currently carrying with me.
Cool. Well, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to keep my eye on that. But yeah, I mean that's all we have time for today. Sadly, I just want to reiterate to my listeners again, please go watch In Flames. You can currently catch it on VOD. For those of you interested in social commentary, independent cinema, art house horror, you would certainly enjoy this. And although the film is set in Pakistan, I think it brings forth a universal pain that must be addressed. So, how else can people support the film? How can they support you? Do you want to shout out anything at all?
The film in North America is now available on streaming, and most streaming like Fandango, you can buy and rent it. And if you're in the UK, we're still in cinemas over there. But yeah, I guess talk about the movie and write reviews on Letterboxd. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it and best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Marta.
Of course. Bye bye.